that's everything. So I leave the floor to Sven.
Thank you, Henrik. I would also like to say that if during the 10-minute break, you can also go and have some fika at the reception, at the cafeteria, sorry. Please turn those off, please. So, very welcome to this session. I'm honored that so many of you are here. And we also have some participants from the internet side. So let's buckle up and have a good ride for this presentation. I hope you will have that. So this PhD journey started in 2013. It has been truly rewarding. It could not have been done without my supervisors, Henrik, Göran, and also Louise. Also, my co-authors had provided a great support. Lisiana, Carl-Henrik, Tobias Larsson, thought he would be here today, but no. And also Dr. Anders Kraus from Chalmers, especially in the electric bus study. But the greatest support, by all means, has been from my wife, Christina. Thank you. And this is the structure of the presentation. It follows the structure in the thesis, but the background chapter is merged into the introduction and also the methods. I would also like to say that this presentation does not cover everything in the thesis. I would spend a whole day with you if that was the case. So it's just about to introduce you to the thesis and some highlights in the thesis. So also at the very top left, you will see a reference to the thesis, where we are at in that. So chapter and section. So we start with the intro. And I would like to say something about the sustainability challenge that we are facing right now. It can be illustrated via a funnel metaphor, where the walls of the funnel are closing into the middle here, which represents a state where we can move on to a sustainable future. And the walls are inclined because they're closing in because we are using up the resources that we have on Earth today. And as you may know, the global overshoot day was the 1st of August. So now we're actually borrowing from next year and future generations. And in Sweden, we reached that day already the 4th of April this year. Some examples for transport sector that is not contributing to sustainable development: noise, emissions, and fossil oil dependency. There are much more. I just want to mention some of them. If we get a good picture of what sustainability is about, then we can actually move backwards a bit in the funnel and try to design activities and goals that are in line with the sustainable development. And then we also realize that we reduce the noise, we reduce the emissions, we reduce the fossil oil dependency completely, more or less. And that is examples of how we can go to a sustainable future. We'd like to bring up some examples. This is a carbon dioxide example, emissions by sectors in Europe. As you can see, the transport sector, the green line here, is increasing. So it has an increasing trend. And it's also a matter of fact that the cars are actually a big part of that increase. Air pollutions, they also contribute to unsustainability because they have negative health effects, reduce crop yield, affect animals and insects, everything that we need to maintain our ecosystem services that we actually depend upon. I have calculated through the ASEC model, which is a societal cost model designed by Trafikverket, which is the Swedish Transport Administration. In 2014, the emissions from transport costed the Swedish society 156,000 million Swedish crowns. And in Europe, that was 360,000 million euros. So you have to add 10 here, according to Roy et al. Transport system also expands on the land, and these pictures are from the planned and proposed new E22 between Jämjö and Lösen in Karlskrona municipality. As you can see, oops, sorry, I was too fast. Sorry for that. We go. As you can see, transport system, it spreads over into agricultural land, and it also inhabit large areas. For example, roads for parking. It competes with farming and built environment and other productive services. So what about solutions then? Well, biofuels has been mentioned since long ago as a great solutions for sustainable transport. For example, the report about fossil fuel independency in Sweden by Johansson et al. In 2013, and also the roadmap Sweden by Ståhl et al. In 2013. Just a few examples. Biofuels are very good because they are non-fossil. It has a great reduction of carbon dioxide, but not other emissions. For example, Gran and Spray wrote last year that half of the global fuel demand can be covered by biofuels, and 1/3 in Sweden, right? Thanks. Biofuels are very good because they can provide a flexibility in the primary energy, and that is really helpful for the society at large, because then we can have a good transition towards flow-based energy. I won't go into that deeply. But I would like to talk about electric vehicles. It has been proposed by, for example, Johansson et al. In 2013, Nurhadi et al. 2014, and also the UK Department for Transport in 2018, a recent report, that it looks like it's a solution towards green mobility because it has a great deal in energy efficiency. There are no emissions when we are driving the vehicles, and also it has a possibility to use only renewable energy for that kind of transport. Right, and the technology has become more and more mature for personal mobility. For example, we have almost 10 cities in Sweden that have electric buses in public transport. There are tests with self-driving vehicles in public transport in Gothenburg and Stockholm currently. And there's also a great development of the range and the charging capabilities of personal electric vehicles. And electric cars, like this one, they have about half of the sales in Norway this year. So it's really on the way, so to say. Well, there are existing goals and roadmap, as I told you before. They often focus on the transport system itself and climate issues. There is a need of a life cycle perspective, and also the interaction between the transport sector and other sectors. Added to that, it's complicated to plan for transport systems. And there are many different stakeholders with different interests and different perspectives. So in order to address those needs, the framework for strategic sustainable development was created, not by me, but quite many years ago. It has been used in other studies for sustainable transport and sustainable transport system development. It's rooted in science through development of scientists in Sweden, for example, Göran Broman and Carl-Henrik Robert, but also John Holmberg at Chalmers. He did a PhD thesis on this. And also Melina Missemer here at PTH developing the social sustainability principles. It has also been tested in businesses and sectors since 1989. It can I have to say that it can include a lot of other methods and tools. For example, planetary boundaries, ISO 14001, eco indicator and cradle to cradle, and as long as they are supported for a transition towards sustainability. And it also contains sustainability principles, which can be placed in the funnel like this. So this indicates that you have to comply with those sustainability principles in order to reach towards a sustainable future. So this leads us to the aim and the research question of this thesis. So the aim is to investigate if and how EVs can, which is electric vehicles, can support sustainable personal mobility. And then we have the following research questions that were developed to guide the thesis. The first one was, what could an approach to sustainable transport planning at large look like? And it's not only here, it's also here. I wrote them up for you in order to follow what I referred to in the results section. So the second one is, what is the potential role of electric vehicles in and towards a sustainable society? The third one is more about calculation, main current business model, sustainability effects and costs. And the fourth, major barriers and enablers for development of sustainable personal mobility. And how could decision support models for procurement of electric bus systems? The fifth one. So the phrasing is here, exact phrasing. And the research started off in the GreenCharge project. This was a great project in the whole southeast of Sweden. And it included almost all county boards, regions, municipalities, and a lot of companies in this region, southeast of Sweden. And it aimed to achieve a market breakthrough for electric vehicles, demonstrations of electric vehicles and business cooperation, and a validated analysis and research methods for business models and sustainability impacts of these. And at last, we wanted to create a roadmap for sustainable and effective EV systems within a regional fossil-free transport sector by 2030. The research, we focused on those two, and I had a focus on sustainability impacts in this project. The other project that has been affecting this research, it was a later project. It was finalized this summer, actually. Decision support for how electric buses can be integrated in public transport. So I've been working on that. There you go. And we had research partners from Chalmers and Electro Driving Scandinavia. I more or less was in the driver's seat for this project. The Swedish Energy Agency had a big contribution in this, as well as the GreenCharge project when it comes to funding. And we did in real life testing within 5 cities, and these were Umeå, Karlstad, Västerås, Ängelholm, and Gothenburg, where buses were already running in public transport. So we used that as a study, in real life study. We wanted to investigate about sustainability effects, energy use, total cost of ownership, that is TCO. It will appear more times in this presentation. Total cost of ownership and societal costs. Also wanted to look into how can we develop business models for this, and also a tool for optimizing electric bus systems. How much battery should we have in a bus, and how much charging should there be on a route, for example. So there was an optimization tool for this. I want already now to move into the to tell you about the papers that are included, because I will refer to them up front in this presentation. So the first paper in the thesis is about a strategic approach to sustainable transport system development. And part one, attempting a generic community planning process model. It's part one because this is part two. So they were actually developed together, and then we realized in the end that this is two big articles, so we divided them into two. And the second one is a case of a vision for electric vehicle systems in southeast of Sweden. Both of them were published in the same issue of Journal Cleaner Production. The third one, strategic sustainability, and this should be erased. Shouldn't be there, sorry for that. Of electric vehicles in Europe today and towards 2050. This was a conference paper presented in Madrid at the ICSUIT conference in 2016. The fourth paper was about competitiveness and sustainability effects of cars and their business model in Swedish small town regions. It was also published in the Journal Cleaner Production, so it's the same issue as the first two. So the fifth paper, Electric Buses Sustainability Effects, Cost, Noise and Energy Use. It is submitted to a journal. It's actually in review. I haven't heard from them the last weeks, so we'll see. The sixth paper, Stakeholder Collaboration Model for Public Transport Procurement of Electric Buses. This one is actually accepted for publication with minor corrections. I got that message last week, so we're happy about that. At the International Journal of Sustainability Policies and Practice. I would also like to say that in the thesis and at SustainTrans website, there are other publications not included in the thesis, but I've done them anyhow as reports and some early papers. And you can find them at the SustainTrans website as well. Now we move into the methods chapter. This is a methodology that I used earlier upon in the thesis work. It's the Maxwell Research Design Methodology. It has been included in my research plan, and it also framed the thesis and initial research questions. We will dive a little bit into the methods part, where I have used the design research methodology. It's a complement and continuation of Maxwell, and especially useful when designing individual papers. That's at least how I have used it. The research clarification phase refined the goals and the focus by literature studies and knowledge from early GreenCharge studies. It was helpful for designing paper 1 to 2. A better understanding in the descriptive phase 1 was achieved, where empirical data was analyzed via strategic life cycle assessment and also life cycle assessment, for example. It was particularly helpful in paper 1 to 5, so that is almost all papers. The next prescriptive study phase built on assumptions, experience, and synthesis from each study to find the proposed solutions that we wanted to develop. It was helpful in paper 1 to 4 and 6. And then the last phase was helpful when designing the last papers, the interviews and shadowing, but it also built on the results that we had earlier upon in the thesis. Right, so I will show you a little, just examples of where information was collected in databases and internet. You can see that there are some Swedish sites, which is because this research was mainly for Swedish purposes. There's also done a lot of interviews and also stakeholder collaboration seminars that contributed to almost all papers with the interviews, and also the seminars to almost all papers. Well, the seminars were contributing to paper 1 to 2 and also to the 6th paper, but to some extent, should I say, in the results of other papers. How did I use the sustainability principles then? I won't go through the principles here. They are in the book, so you can read about them. Well, the first 3 are about ecological sustainability, and the 4th one is about social sustainability. This setup with 4 principles was used in paper 1 to 4. And then there was a development by Melina Missimer. We had 5 more sustainability principles, social sustainability principles, and these were used in paper 5 to 6. The ABCD is a methodology to actually apply the framework for strategic sustainable development. It informed the structure and the flows, and especially in paper 1 to 2, to identify a vision for sustainable transport. So the vision is here, and you are familiar with the funnel already. I have then used different methods in baseline analysis, which is the B step, and to find out about the current situation. And we also used, assessment of paper 3 to 5. In the C step, used external and internal project-related workshops, and that was to brainstorm solutions towards the vision. And in the D step, you then build a plan for sustainable development towards the vision by prioritizing among all the ideas that are achieved in the C step. We have not used the D step in this. I have not used the D step in this thesis, though, but it has been used in other publications that I have been part of in this thesis journey. For example, the GreenCharge roadmap. So moving on, and the strategic life cycle assessment provides a quick identification of high-level sustainability challenges. It guides necessary decisions and activities and additional analysis. The relation to life cycle assessment can be illustrated like this. In paper 3 to 5, it was used to quantify environmental impacts, the use of energy, and also use of materials, and also the use of land. Total cost of ownership is then based on life cycle costing, and it was used in paper 4 to 5 to include cost for especially vehicles, but then also other systems. And I will dive into that later on. All the results were found in collaboration with colleagues and experts, logical reasoning, and then data from other analysis. For example, the LCA database EcoInvent, but also from other literatures. Now we move into the results chapter, and I would like to take a little bit of water. Can you hear me at the back? Good, thanks, Charles. This column over here is the relation to research questions, which you have here. So you can see those symbols popping up now and then when they relate to what I will show on the screen. We started off the results with showing a methodological support for sustainable transport system development. This comprises an iterative multi-stakeholder planning process embedding the framework for strategic sustainable development, and it includes 4 interdependent planning perspectives, as you can see here. So what we do here when we use this methodology nowadays is that the vision for sustainable transport system is created here by a core team. So this is a draft, just to get a good grip on what's going on with this sector or system that we want to study. Then several ABCDs are created in these different groups, which are planning perspectives. And then this is feedback to the core team, which send it out on public review after scrutinization. And after scrutinization, again, it's handed over to management decision makers to say if they want to have it implemented or tried out or not. The integration of framework for strategic sustainable makes it capable of guiding planning for transport system development, but also for other community development of strategic sustainability perspective. So it's not only for transport. And this answers research question 1. And it was also published in paper 1. So as a part of the work on developing a generic planning process model for strategic sustainable transport, a vision of sustainable transport system in Southeast Sweden was developed, and also an initial plan towards that vision was also designed. So I would like to show you the plan. This is for today, where we have a lot of violations of the sustainability principles. This is in 2030, where we have more of hybrids, biofuels, and electric vehicles. And then we violate sustainability principles less. And at the third stage, you can see, which is also the vision here that was created in this paper and answering the research question 2. We don't have any violations of sustainability principles. We can still do a lot of things, but we just have to comply. We have to comply with the sustainability principles. Yes, it informs research question 1 and 2, but also partly about barriers and enablers, which is research question 4. I would like to move into strategic life cycle assessment that I told you before and here we break down violations to sustainability principles in each life cycle phase of the product or whatever we are studying. So this is a study where I compared internal combustion engine vehicles with battery electric vehicles, which is also called clean electric vehicles, and also a hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicle. So as you can see, there are violations here, here, and here, negative sustainability impacts. And there are less for the battery electric vehicle and also even less for the hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicle. I won't go through all of the principles. You can see that major negative sustainability effects are mainly related to the extensive use of fossil fuels, insufficient recycling of materials, resource extracted through open pit mining for some materials, child labor use and dangerous working conditions during extraction and recycling of some materials, and also conflict over resources, example, oil and some metals like cobalt. In paper 5, the strategic life cycle assessment for city buses, I was using the new 5 social sustainability principles as well for strategic life cycle assessment. And in addition to this, we also found that corruption and partial treatment of different groups of people related to mining is negative effect. And people's connecting to the traditional land and culture is hindered. For example, when people are forced to move due to open pit mining or conflicts over resources. So this feeds into research question 3 and 4. And I would like then to also show you an example of how energy use and emissions can be calculated for buses, 12-meter buses. So I did a life cycle assessment again, and here I compared with biogas buses. The biogas was produced from waste. Ordinary diesel bus with some rapeseed oil included in the diesel, which is common today. An electric bus that was propelled by wind generated electricity. And the HVO stands for the heating of the interior in the bus, which is needed in the Swedish climate. And at last, HVO as a fuel for the bus, which is the case in Karlskrona, that all the buses in the city are propelled by or powered by HVO from tallow, which is slaughterhouse waste. So going through this, you can see that electric buses use less energy throughout both the use phase, which is when you drive the vehicle, but also extraction to distribution phase, which are the phases earlier than the use phase. Also, when it comes to greenhouse gases, the electric bus is lowest for all phases, life cycle phases. And that is actually the case for all of the emissions that I have included in this study, that the electric bus is lowest on all emissions throughout the whole life cycle. So this feeds into research question 3 and 4 and published in paper 5. I would also like to show you an example of a LCA I did in paper 3. So this is about cars. The cars in the size of Volkswagen Golf. Again, we have the different phases of a life cycle. And as you can see, if you drive an electric vehicle on European electricity mix, it will actually be higher impact than if you drive it on ethanol and a biogas car, but much lower than the fossil fuel cars. And you can also see that there's not much effect, climate change effect, if you drive it on wind generated electricity. So this was done by CIMA Pro. It's a tool for calculating life cycle assessment. And it feeds into research question 3 and 4. I can see that I'm slightly going over time. I hope you can bear with me with that. Business modeling for cars. This study showed that after 9 years of ownership, which is 15,000 kilometers per year, an electric car was found to be at least 10% cheaper than a gasoline-powered car. Another result of this study was that taxiing is the most preferable or the most cost-effective way to travel with a car. If you do that below 2,000 kilometers per year. Then comes carpooling, which is today it's called car sharing. Then car leasing and regular purchase, which most of us, we own a car today. So that is the business model, which is preferable if you drive more than 13,500 kilometers per year. That is actually more than most of us do, because the average the average distance is 12,200 kilometers per year in Sweden. So it's actually here. So most of us should do car leasing instead, from a cost-effective perspective. And this feeds into research question 3 and 4, and also was published in paper 4. When it comes to total cost of ownership of buses instead, It was found that it's 14% more expensive to run a diesel bus when compared to an opportunity charged 12-meter bus. This one, and there you can also see that if there are opportunity charge, which is charge on a route when they are driving, so at the end stations, for example, and the depot charge. So that is when the bus have a lot of batteries instead, so you can drive a lot of hours and then come back to the depot and charge it in the depot, bus depot, where the bus operator have all their buses. I should also say that this is a conservative study. For example, there's an extra battery included in the costs here. So you change battery after 5 years. And this also stipulates that the contract period is 10 years. So the buses are driving 10 years, starting this year as a baseline year. And it also stipulates a continuation of rising fuel and electricity prices, and a slightly decreased battery prices, and maintenance costs also decreased for electric buses. And this feeds into research question 3 and 4 again, published in paper 5. And in paper 5 also looked into societal costs. And this is calculated based on the model, ASEC model, I told you about before, by Trafikverket, which is the Swedish Transport Administration. So the societal cost for emission from diesel buses are actually 100 times more higher than for electric buses, which is here, and this is, so it includes more than CO2, this model. It doesn't include all emissions, but it includes some significant emissions from transport. I also calculated noise, because that could be an important case when it comes to societal cost, actually. And I found that the electric bus, we did a test this with electric buses, how they compare with the ordinary buses. And they are actually 5 decibel less exterior noise during acceleration. So, for example, when you start your journey from a bus stop, the bus accelerates, and there it creates a lot of noise if it's a diesel bus, but not if it's an electric bus. You can see the cost is actually lowered by 750,000 Swedish crowns per year if it was driven on route number 1 in Karlskrona. I would also like to say that an increase of 3 decibel is perceived as a doubling of the noise level. And it's also important to see here that the model says that the cost of emissions are about 100 times lower than for cost for noise. So we can think about that. Trafikverket don't think that this model is perfect. So we see what happens in the future with this model. Feeds into research question 3 and 4, again, published in paper 5. And I talked a lot about research question 3 and 4, so I would like to sum that up. Major effect and barriers. As you can see, scarce metals and batteries and fuel in batteries and fuel cells is a problem here. Emissions and leakages from mining, fossil fuels in production and also in distribution phase. Another barrier is the high price of electric vehicles, even though it's lower total cost of ownership, and it's also lower societal cost. It's also something. It's actually not a barrier. No, sorry for that. Enablers for electric vehicles towards sustainability is that we are much more extensive when we're recycling materials. We use more abundant materials. It's also important, the expansion of renewable energy has to follow the expansion of electric vehicle systems, because otherwise we will not, we will use more dirty electricity. So it has to be coupled up here. There are incentives to reduce high price in Sweden, but if you look on Norway, for example, it's cheaper to buy electric vehicles than to buy ordinary vehicles. So that is something to remember. And also expansion of charging infrastructure is particularly important for electric cars development. At last, decision support for electric buses. So I would like to talk about the new stakeholder roles for this, because when bus traffic is procured today, it usually involves the public transport authority and bus traffic operators, to some extent bus manufacturers, and to a little extent the municipality. But when we have electric bus systems, we also have chargers, and we have to use the existing electricity grid. So that's why we propose that charging operators, charging manufacturers, electricity grid owners, and electricity dealers should also be involved in this process. And the process starts off with that those stakeholders are agreeing upon a bus ecosystem. Then they agree about the charging infrastructure design. Should it be opportunity charging or should it be depot charging? And then there's a construction of the infrastructure, and then we come to business as usual with the bus traffic procurement and operation and maintenance. And this shows where it fits into the existing procurement process. I won't go through this in deep, I just want to introduce it. The first model is optimized for opportunity charging, and also if those stakeholders have a low level of experience. The second model is instead fitted for depot charging, or if the stakeholders have a high level of experiences with electric bus systems, because then the phases can look, the different steps can look like this instead. That you have a discussion about initial charging infrastructure design, and when you have agreed that it should be depot charging, then you can more or less do it as business as usual. But yes, so they are included in the depot, which is usually the case for when you have fueling stations at the depot today. All right, so this fits into the last research question, procurement of electric buses. I can see that I'm slightly going over time. I hope you can bear with that. So we move into the discussion chapter, and the technology development is fast when it comes to electric vehicles, especially regarding charging, energy storages in batteries, fuel cells, business models. You maybe heard about ride hailing and autonomous taxis. So this might lead to an update of the results for research question 3 and 5. Life cycle costing depend on shifts in the financial market. A change in the assumptions might then lead to an update of paper 3 and 4. No, sorry, 4 and 5. Prices are, though, representative enough for this thesis. It gives a reasonable indication of the most likely total cost of ownership and carbon dioxide emissions per kilometer. When it comes to strategic life cycle assessment and life cycle assessment in paper 3 to 5, there are different sources for those life cycle assessment. And it also might be that these data get updated after each paper has been published. This could affect the answers to research question 3 and 4. The broad, the broad array of involved stakeholders in southeast of Sweden has generally acknowledged the vision and the initial development plan as being relevant and anchored in the region, but still think that further testing is needed for these three models that were proposed in the study. And of course, in real life testing, it's always the case that after you have done the study, you know what you should have done. But I still believe that the way we did it provided good quality to the study, and it also fulfilled the objectives of the study. So now we move to some comparisons. There is a common focus on climate change. Some studies included a life cycle perspective, which is then well-to-wheel perspective, like the Adverse et al. In 2014 and Rice et al. In 2010, where environmental impacts typically exclude the disposal and production of vehicles. There are some comprehensive LCA studies, and they are mentioned in the book. They mostly cover the ecological sustainability principles, but they lack an analysis of the social sustainability aspects. The FSSD, on the other hand, it includes, as you heard, a science-based, all-encompassing principle definition of sustainability, and thereby it covers more. Another comparison I would like to speak about is Söderholm in 2018. He discovered that maintenance costs are lower for electric cars. When it comes to plug-in cars, the maintenance cost is similar than to combustion engine cars. Another study by Nicholas and Hall, we also in-depth literature review by them, that verified also the barriers and enablers that I found in this study regarding fast charging. The main contributions to research and society. New science-based knowledge on how and stakeholder collaborations model for strategic sustainable development of personal mobility with a focus on electric cars and electric buses. Sorry, yeah, that's the picture. Probably stakeholders involved were influenced by the findings. Some stakeholders initiated work in line with recommendations. For example, strategies for upcoming procurement of public transport, integrated transport planning on regional and municipal level, and also investment in electric vehicles and charging system in municipal organizations. This is the case in Karlskrona, actually. It is also likely that some stakeholders that were involved in the projects increased their knowledge through discussions and workshops about strategic sustainable development of personal mobility. So what's next? And that's also a reason for why you are here. I want to hear what you think I should be doing in the next years. So please tell me about that later. More modes of mobility, that is what we want to study on land, at sea, because it provides a higher total system efficiency. Future work, specific decision support systems for sustainable transport development can be based on the stakeholder collaboration models, those two. Three, sorry, there's one more. The planning process model in paper 1 is currently tested in the Interconnect project, Victor, and which is focusing on improving public transport in the South Baltic region in a sustainable way. And it's also further developed in the PhD studies by Lisa Välitalo here at PTH, and where she focuses about process support for strategic sustainable development in municipalities and regions. That was actually it. And thank you for listening and your patience. Happy that not all of you fell asleep. So now we move into the next part, which is a break. Henrik would like to say something, maybe?
Thank you. we will be back here in 10 minutes and rearrange the room.